Story 1. Last summer, when I was 22, I experienced something that still feels surreal. I wasn't a very outgoing person at the time, and if I ever did anything social, it was because my friends somehow managed to drag me out of the house. This was one of those times, or at least it was supposed to be. My friend Philip invited me to a house party at around 8 p.m. It was spontaneous, but I didn't have anything else going on, so I reluctantly agreed. Philip and I lived a few towns apart, so we decided to drive separately. He sent me the address and I set out, figuring it wouldn't be too bad. However, the moment I pulled onto the street, Philip texted to tell me he couldn't make it. I was furious. How could he bail on me at the last second? There I was, outside a stranger's house, feeling like a complete idiot. But since I had already made the trip, I decided to go in anyway. As I walked up the steps, I knocked on the door, hoping I wouldn't regret this decision. To my surprise, the host, Randy, greeted me warmly. He was charismatic and friendly without being overbearing. He introduced me to people, and, to my relief, everyone was surprisingly welcoming. The night progressed, and I started to enjoy myself. Even the idea of being alone felt distant as I mingled and drank. By around 2 a.m., though, I had definitely overdone it with the booze. Nauseous and dizzy, I needed a break. I wandered upstairs in search of a bathroom, but they were all occupied. Stumbling through the maze-like hallways, I ended up in what appeared to be an attic. Desperate for some privacy, I climbed up and fumbled around for a light switch, but there wasn't one. The room smelled of dust and disuse. I opened a window to let the cool night air in, which helped ease my nausea. For a moment, I felt a strange peace, just staring out into the quiet darkness. That's when I heard it, footsteps on the roof. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but as I looked outside, I saw two masked figures with bags climbing out of another window. My heart sank. Randy's house was being robbed. Panic hit me, but I didn't know what to do. Shouting might alert the burglars and put me in danger. Were they armed? As I stood frozen, I accidentally scuffed a shingle, and the sound drew their attention. One of the burglars turned to face me, our eyes locking for a brief moment. He nudged his partner, and they both started moving quickly across the roof. Adrenaline surged through me. I couldn't just let them get away. I followed them, keeping a safe distance. They reached a sloping section of the roof, preparing to climb down. I reached for my phone to call 911, but in my drunken state, I dropped it. The phone clattered loudly, and one of the burglars hissed, "Who's there?" Panicking, I grabbed a loose shingle and threw it in their direction. It missed, but the noise startled them. One of the burglars lost his footing and tumbled down the roof, crashing into the gutter before hitting the ground. The other one scrambled down a tree and disappeared into the night. I rushed back inside, my heart pounding. Sirens blared in the distance. Someone else must have called the police. Downstairs, the party was still in full swing, oblivious to what had just happened. I found Randy and told him what I'd seen. His expression shifted from amusement to shock as he quickly called the police. The mood of the party changed instantly. People began leaving as the police arrived. I explained everything to the officers and led them to the injured burglar, who was promptly arrested. His partner, however, was long gone. Randy thanked me profusely, still in disbelief over the events of the night. Months later, I got an unexpected update. While hanging out with Philip, he got a call from Randy, inviting us over for drinks. I hadn't realized how close they were. When we arrived, I noticed the house had undergone significant changes. The front door and windows were all reinforced and looked entirely different. In the basement, over beers and a game of pool, Randy shared the aftermath of the robbery. The captured burglar refused to give up his partner, resulting in a lengthy prison sentence. But things didn't end there. Not long after the incident, Randy's family began receiving threatening letters, some of which included photos of them. Despite reporting this to the police, no leads emerged. Then, one night, Randy's mom spotted a suspicious car circling their house at 1 a.m. A few days later, items in their backyard were found moved or tampered with. These events prompted Randy's dad to significantly upgrade their home security, replacing all the doors and windows. Hearing all this left me shaken. I hadn't realized just how serious the situation had become. With summer approaching, I'm sure there will be more updates. For now, I'm just grateful no one was hurt that night. Story 2. This unsettling situation began about a month ago, but let me backtrack a bit to give you the full picture. I am 24 years old, and I live with my parents. My family has never been well off, and most of my earnings go toward helping out with the household. My relationship with my parents is far from perfect. We argue frequently, and when I am not working or hanging out with friends, I tend to keep to myself. Growing up was tough, and while I do not want to turn this into a pity party, that is just the reality of it. Fitness has always been my escape. It is my way to clear my mind and deal with life stresses while also giving me a reason to step out of the house. There is a park about 10 minutes from where I live that has an outdoor workout area with bars for pull-ups, dips, and other exercises. I love going there, especially during the summer, because being out in nature helps calm me. I prefer working out at night, though, since the park can get pretty crowded during the day. One night, after my parents got into another heated argument, I decided to slip out of the house and head to the park. It was an oppressively hot summer night, probably around 85 degrees Fahrenheit. The humid air clung to my skin as I walked out to my beat-up white Corolla parked in the driveway. I started the engine, rolled down the windows, and let the warm breeze flow through my hair as I drove off. When I arrived at the park, it was completely deserted. It must have been around 10 or 11 p.m. The atmosphere was tranquil, with the park's hill offering a breathtaking view of downtown lit up in the distance. That view always made my evenings feel a little more special. I started my usual routine on the pull-up bar, losing myself in the rhythm of the workout. I never count my repetitions. I just go until I cannot anymore, rest, and then repeat. Between sets, as I was stretching my arms, I felt a strange, indescribable sensation, like something was off. Instinctively, I turned around. Standing no more than a foot away from me was a tall, disheveled man. I screamed and stumbled back several feet. He let out a loud, raspy laugh and quickly apologized, saying he did not mean to scare me. But his presence was jarring. His face was gaunt, and his behavior was unsettling. I asked him why he was standing so close to me, and he casually said he lived here. He mentioned that he often saw me working out at the park and asked if I could teach him some exercises. I am not one for confrontation, and I really just wanted to be left alone, so I awkwardly told him I was finishing up soon. I turned back to the bar and tried to focus on my workout, but his words stuck with me. I see you here all the time. I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. My discomfort grew, but I did not know how to handle the situation. As I was finishing my set, I heard him softly say my full name. My stomach dropped. My blood ran cold as I let go of the bar and spun around. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice shaking. He just stood there, grinning with wide, unblinking eyes. I felt sick to my core. Without another word, I decided to leave. As I walked back to my car, I could feel his gaze burning into me. When I glanced back, I saw him hanging from the pull-up bar, mimicking the exact position I had been in moments earlier. The next morning, as I left for work, I noticed an unmarked envelope on our front porch. It was addressed to me. I tossed it into my bag, figuring I would look at it later. During my lunch break, I opened it and immediately froze. Inside were 10 photos of me, taken without my knowledge. The pictures showed me in various places. In my car, at work, working out at the park. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. The last 2 photos were the worst. One was of my house, and the final one showed me sleeping, taken through my bedroom window. I felt nauseous and terrified. I left work early and drove straight to the police station. I handed them the photos and described the man from the park. They promised to investigate, but I could tell their hands were tied without more evidence. The following nights were a nightmare. At around 3 a.m., there was loud knocking at our door. I refused to answer, fearing the worst. Another time, I found a sticky note stuck to my car window with a heart drawn in red marker. I went back to the police to report these incidents. They assured me they would open a stalking investigation, but so far, I have not heard any updates. My parents and I are now trying to find a new place to live, though it is not easy with our financial struggles. For now, I am constantly on edge, always looking over my shoulder. If anything more happens, I will update, but until then, I am just trying to survive one day at a time. Story 3. I have always believed that summer is hands down the best season, and I will defend that opinion to the end. My love for summer is not about wild parties or heavy drinking, as some might assume. It is about the beauty of nature, the warmth of the sun, and the joy of being outdoors. When the summer heat hits, you can bet I spend more time outside than inside. This story takes place on a warm June night a few years ago. I was around 17 or 18 at the time. For context, there is a massive nature reserve near my house, about 1,000 acres in size. Even now, I am sure there are parts of it I have not explored. My two friends and I decided to camp there overnight. Even though camping in the preserve was technically illegal, we figured we could avoid any trouble by venturing far enough into the woods. My friend Chris was the outdoorsman of the group. He was basically a modern-day Boy Scout, always eager to show off his knot-tying skills and survival tricks. Then there was Mike, who was the life of the party. He never showed up without drinks, believing that a good time required a little liquid courage. That evening, with a cool breeze on our faces, we loaded up Mike's car with our gear. The weather was perfect, not too hot, not too cool. A couple of beers later, we found ourselves trudging into the woods at nearly midnight, carrying camping supplies and following Chris's lead. He had this ridiculously bright flashlight, so the darkness did not bother us much. Still, walking through a dense forest at that hour was unnerving, even for someone like me who loves the outdoors. After about half an hour, we reached a flat clearing that Chris deemed perfect for setting up camp. Following his instructions, we pitched the tent and set up our chairs. The next order of business was the fire. Chris took charge, and soon we had a warm, crackling blaze. Mike pulled out his portable speaker, cranked up some tunes, and handed me another drink. For the next 2 hours, we sat there, laughing, drinking, and enjoying the night. Things took a turn around 3 a.m. Mike had just turned down the music and started cleaning up our mess when a loud, piercing whistle shattered the silence. My heart jumped into my throat. It was not the kind of sound you expect in the middle of nowhere. The whistle was unnaturally loud but distant, like it came from some otherworldly referee. Mike shut the speaker off immediately, and we all froze, exchanging nervous glances. The forest, which had been alive with chirps and rustling earlier, now seemed eerily quiet. It was like the whole place was holding its breath. Chris suggested we pack up and leave, but Mike and I hesitated. It felt risky to wander the woods at night, especially if someone, or something, was out there. After some debate, we decided to stay put and keep the fire burning. Chris believed the light would ward off animals, but the thought of being so far from civilization with an unknown presence nearby was terrifying. We tried to keep our voices low, but none of us dared to sleep. Then, out of nowhere, something small flew through the darkness and landed in the fire. It was a firecracker. I screamed as it sparked and popped in the flames. Chris jumped out of his chair, cursing, and bolted into the woods. Mike and I grabbed our gear and ran after him, leaving everything else behind. We ran until we could barely breathe, finally stopping to catch our breath. Surprisingly, it did not seem like anyone was following us. Chris wanted to go back to the campsite to put out the fire and retrieve his gear, but Mike was adamant about leaving everything behind. After a heated argument, Chris convinced me to return with him. When we got back, we saw the fire's glow in the distance. As we crept closer, Mike stopped me and pointed ahead. There, sitting in our chairs, were 3 figures. They were completely still, like statues. One of them had an open mouth that looked unnervingly lifeless. We backed away slowly, but Mike accidentally kicked a rock, letting out a curse. In an instant, the fire went out, like someone had thrown a blanket over it. We did not stick around to see what would happen next. This time, the sound of footsteps followed us as we sprinted to the car. By some miracle, we made it out of the woods and sped home in silence. The next day, Chris convinced me to return to the site during daylight to retrieve his belongings. Mike refused to join us. When we got there, everything seemed untouched, except for the smell. Chris's tent reeked. When he unzipped it, we found a dead, rotting rat inside. That was enough for me. I have not been back to those woods since.